City of Screams. Grand Central Terminal throbbed, a leviathan of steel and steam, spewing forth the pent-up vitality of countless souls. Lily Thompson, clutching her worn carpetbag, felt diminished, swallowed by its immensity. The train, her iron steed from rural Ohio, had deposited her on this very platform, and now she stood transfixed, a lone reed in a tempest. She had envisioned New York naturally, gleaned hints from pulp novels and grainy newsprint. Yet reality delivered an unanticipated, overwhelming assault. The din was a physical presence, the shriek of brakes, the booming announcements, the vendors' insistent calls, and the deep, resonant vibration that pulsed from the city's very foundation. A human current surged around her, a relentless wave of hats and dresses, faces set in determined lines, shoulders brushing past without acknowledgement. She recoiled against a marble pillar, its coolness a meager solace against the oppressive heat. "Out of the way, sister." A man in a soiled apron, sweat glistening on his brow, jostled her, nearly stumbling over her bag. Lily offered a muted apology, though blameless. Her heart hammered a frantic tattoo against her ribs. Where was he? Where was Mr. Abernathy? His last letter had been so explicit, so reassuring. Meet beneath the clock in Grand Central, holding a copy of the New York Times. Simple enough, she'd presumed, imagining a kind, older man, perhaps a bit lonely but inherently good. She strained to see through the swirling throng. The clock, an enormous, gilded timepiece, towered above the information kiosk. Yet a churning vortex of bodies obscured everything around it. Each face a mask of anonymity, each gaze fixed on some distant horizon. How naive she had been, yearning for escape from the predictable cadence of Harmony Creek. The farm, her aunt's relentless pronouncements on suitable suitors, the soul-crushing confinement. Mr. Abernathy, a widower with a hardware store, had represented deliverance. A chance at autonomy, a life unfettered. Now, confronted by this chaotic, overpowering metropolis, she wondered if she'd embarked on a disastrous course. A newsboy, barely a man, darted past, shouting, "Extra! Extra! Read about the blaze in Hell's Kitchen." The words, stark and menacing, mirrored the burgeoning dread within her. Fire! Hell's Kitchen. So unlike Harmony Creek. She had donned her best frock, a simple blue cotton edged with lace. Now it felt glaringly unsophisticated, a flag advertising her as an outsider, a gullible country girl ripe for exploitation. She drew her shawl tighter, seeking refuge from the city's judging gaze. The air hung heavy with coal smoke, the reek of horses, and a sharp, metallic tang that made her eyes water. She coughed, her throat burning. This was not the crisp, untainted air of Ohio's verdant fields. The city exhaled grime and desperation. She noticed a man holding a newspaper, his back presented to her. He possessed height, broad shoulders, and wore a dark overcoat. Could it be him? She took a hesitant step, her voice barely audible against the cacophony. "Mr. Abernathy?" The man remained unresponsive. She repeated, her tone slightly louder. "Mr. Abernathy?" He remained oblivious, swallowed by the throng, a ghost among countless strangers. Lily's stomach clenched. She was isolated, utterly and completely alone in a city indifferent to her fate. The weight of her carpetbag became an unbearable burden, dragging her down, rooting her to the spot. She closed her eyes, battling the sting of tears. She had been so intrepid, so resolute in her decision to leave everything behind. But now, standing at the epicenter of this clamorous metropolis, she ached for the serene simplicity of Harmony Creek, the familiar comfort of her aunt's kitchen, the gentle mooing of cows in the pasture. Perhaps she could still retreat. Perhaps she could recover some semblance of dignity and return home. Yet, the thought of facing her aunt's knowing look, of acknowledging her misjudgment, felt almost as terrifying as the city. She opened her eyes, her gaze traversing the swirling pandemonium of Grand Central Terminal. This was it, her new reality. And like it or not, she needed to find a path to survival. Even if it meant navigating this city of screams one frightening step at a time. She lifted her shoulders, tightened her grip on her carpetbag, and inhaled deeply, the acrid air searing her lungs. It was time to locate another clock. Journey to Montana. Lily spun, the crumpled telegram clutched in her sweaty palm. Abernathy. Track 32. Where was Track 32 in this echoing cavern of steel and rushing humanity? The sheer volume of noise pressed in, a physical weight she hadn't anticipated. A sob caught in her throat. She was lost, utterly and completely. A shadow fell across her. She flinched, then looked up. Towering over her was a man built like an oak, his face weathered and lined, a Stetson casting his eyes in shadow. He held a hand out. "You Lily Thompson?" Hope surged, sharp and sudden. "Yes. Are you Mr. Abernathy?" He shook his head, a slow, deliberate movement. "Name's Hank Thompson. Abernathy sent me." Said he couldn't make it. Had some trouble with a sick calf. His voice was gravel, worn smooth by wind and sun. Disappointment pricked at her. Another stranger. Oh. She managed. Hank's gaze sharpened. He took in her city clothes, the delicate shoes, the wide, bewildered eyes. You ready to go to Montana? Montana. The word felt foreign, unreal. She hadn't allowed herself to truly imagine it, to picture the reality of leaving everything behind. Now, staring at this imposing man, the weight of her decision crashed down. I think so. He grunted, a sound that could have been agreement or skepticism. Let's get your bags. He led her, not speaking, through the throng to where her single, battered suitcase sat forlornly by a pillar. He hoisted it with ease, the movement highlighting the breadth of his shoulders. The train to Montana was a far cry from the sleek, modern carriages she'd seen advertised. It was old, worn, the upholstery stained and smelling faintly of coal smoke and stale coffee. They settled into facing seats, the rhythmic clatter of the train quickly filling the silence. Lily watched Hank from the corner of her eye. He stared out the window, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. He seemed uncomfortable, contained. She imagined him at home, on his ranch, surrounded by open space, not crammed into this noisy metal box. Hours blurred into a landscape of endless fields and distant, hazy mountains. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of fiery orange and bruised purple. Hank finally stirred. Hungry? He asked, his voice still gruff, but with a hint of something else, perhaps concern? Lily nodded, her stomach rumbling in response. He pulled out a thick slab of bread and a wedge of cheese wrapped in a cloth from a worn leather bag. He offered it to her. Thank you, she said, surprised by the simple generosity. The bread was dense and slightly sweet, the cheese sharp and tangy. It was the best thing she'd tasted in days. As they ate, Lily noticed small things. The way his calloused hand carefully brushed away a crumb from his beard. The flicker of a smile when a small child ran past their seats, giggling. The quiet sigh he released as the train finally rumbled to a stop in a small, dusty town bathed in the pale light of the moon. This was it. Montana. Hank stood, retrieving her suitcase. Come on, he said, his tone still clipped, but a little less harsh now. Got a long drive ahead of us. He didn't offer her his hand, but as she followed him off the train and into the cool night air, Lily sensed a shift. He was still a stranger, this man from Montana, but he was also her only connection to the life she was about to begin. And maybe, just maybe, beneath the gruff exterior, there was a kindness waiting to be discovered. The air smelled of horses and dry earth, a scent entirely new and strangely comforting. The quiet ranch. The pickup coughed to a halt, scattering loose stones across the dirt path posing as a driveway. Lily's gaze snagged, not on the house, a long, low building of time-worn wood that seemed organically sprouted from the earth, but on the staggering emptiness yawning around it. Hank switched off the engine, dropping them into a hush so complete it vibrated in her skull. No wailing sirens, no insistent horns, no music bleeding from storefronts. Only the sigh of wind through the tall grasses and the lonely shriek of a hawk spiraling high above. Her throat constricted, she managed a small swallow. It's still, Hank grunted, levering himself out of the cab. Precisely. He unfolded his lanky frame and circled the hood to grab her suitcase. The bag looked ridiculously small, dwarfed in his grasp. Lily emerged, her city footwear sinking slightly into the unstable ground. She edged forward, her eyes tracing the immense panorama of undulant hills stretching to the horizon. Overhead, the sky presented an unblemished azure, an infinite canvas ripe with opportunity, or an infinite void, viewed from another angle. A tremor of near panic gripped her. This wasn't mere stillness. It felt like abandonment. New York's clamor had been abrasive, relentless, but at least it pulsed with life. Here, the silence felt weighty, expectant, as if the land itself were poised to assess her. Hank deposited her suitcase on the porch with a dull thud. Well, planning to admire the view all day, or coming inside? She summoned a smile, though her insides churned. Just taking it all in. He offered no reciprocal gesture, only a steady, inscrutable regard. Lily trailed him onto the porch, the aged planks protesting beneath her weight. The front door, crafted from dense oak, led directly into a large, under-furnished living area. A time-worn leather couch faced a stone fireplace and a woven rug partially covered the bare floorboards. Spotlessly clean, yet undeniably stark, devoid of the personal touches she'd always used to transform a dwelling into a home. Your room's down the hall, Hank indicated, gesturing toward a dim corridor. Bathroom's at the end. He paused, his gaze lingering on her face for a breath. Dinner's at 6. With that, he vanished back outside, leaving Lily alone in the resounding quiet. She lugged her suitcase to the designated room, compact, with a single window offering a vista of the seemingly endless countryside. A bed, a dresser, and a small nightstand comprised the entire inventory. Utilitarian, yet devoid of character. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her initial elation at escaping the urban grind supplanted by a creeping unease. She'd replayed this arrival countless times in her mind, the ranch, a fresh start, the embrace of serenity. But reality presented a far more imposing prospect than she'd imagined. She hadn't misled the marriage broker. She genuinely longed for the din to cease. She yearned for space and tranquility. But now she had them in abundance, coupled with the unnerving realization that she was utterly unprepared. She had never saddled a horse, drawn milk from a cow, or even cultivated a garden. Her expertise in ranching extended only to vintage westerns viewed on late-night television. How was she supposed to function as a rancher's wife? How could she contribute to this way of life, this place? The silence closed around her, magnifying her anxieties. She squeezed her eyes shut, attempting to conjure a vision of the future, a future where she was at home here, where she felt competent and self-assured. But all she pictured was the immeasurable expanse of Montana and the overwhelming challenge of evolving into someone she questioned she could ever become. Drawing a fortifying breath, Lily rose and unlatched her suitcase. Best get started unpacking. Best to begin the charade. A dog named Blue. Hank stopped the truck in front of a low-slung porch bathed in the amber glow of the setting sun. Dust swirled around Lily's boots as she climbed out, the vast Montana sky pressing down on her with a weight she couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe? Or just the sheer immensity of it all. This is it, Hank said, his voice gravelly as he cut the engine. The ranch house. It wasn't the grand, sprawling estate she'd half-imagined from his letters. It was lived in. Comfortable, maybe? But definitely not the sterile perfection of her old apartment in Chicago. The paint was peeling in places and the porch sagged a little on one side. A swing hung motionless, its chains whispering in the light breeze. Before Lily could fully absorb the scene, a blur of blue and white fur shot around the corner of the house, barking a greeting. It was a dog, medium-sized and muscular, with one startling blue eye and one brown. An Australian shepherd, she thought, remembering a picture she'd seen in a magazine once. Blue. Hank bellowed, though there was a hint of fondness in his tone. Easy, boy. She's friendly. The dog, Blue, skidded to a halt a few feet from Lily, his tail wagging furiously. He circled her cautiously, sniffing at her boots, then looked up at her with an intelligence that made her shiver. It wasn't just a dog's curiosity, it felt like assessment. This is Blue, Hank said, placing a hand on the dog's back. He's been with me since he was a pup. Best ranch dog you'll ever meet. Lily crouched down slowly, extending a hand. Hi, Blue, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. It's nice to meet you. Blue watched her, his head cocked to one side. He didn't bark or growl, just studied her with those mismatched eyes. Lily could feel his gaze, almost tangible, searching for something within her. After a moment, he licked her outstretched hand, a quick, gentle swipe. A wave of relief washed over her. He wasn't hostile. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be a complete disaster. Hank picked up her suitcase and gestured towards the house. Come on. Let's get you inside. You must be tired. As they walked towards the porch, Lily glanced back at Blue. He was still watching her, his blue eye seeming to gleam in the fading light. He padded silently behind them, keeping a respectful distance. Inside, the house was dim and smelled of wood smoke and something faintly floral. The furniture was old but sturdy, covered in worn fabrics. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It was a far cry from the sleek, modern designs Lily was used to, but there was a certain warmth to it, a sense of history and belonging. Hank set her suitcase down in a small room off the main living area. This will be your room, he said. It's not much, but it's clean. The room was simple, with a single bed, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the vast expanse of the ranch. The air smelled of lavender. It was welcoming. Lily turned back to thank him, but he was already gone, heading back towards the living room. She felt a pang of loneliness, a familiar ache in her chest. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress surprisingly soft. The silence of the room was deafening, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Chicago had been loud, chaotic, but never silent. This quiet felt ominous. Suddenly, she felt a nudge against her hand. She looked down to see Blue, his head resting on her knee, his brown eye looking up at her with an expression that seemed almost compassionate. He whined softly, a low rumble in his chest. Lily stroked his head, burying her fingers in his soft fur. He leaned into her touch, his body warm and solid against her leg. "Thank you, Blue," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being here." He didn't understand her words, of course, but he seemed to understand something else, something deeper. He stayed by her side for a long moment, his presence a silent comfort in the face of her fear. The weight of the Montana sky still pressed down on her, but now it felt a little less heavy. The cattle drive. "Week from today we ride." Hank's gravelly voice, a product of sun and grit, cleaved through the barn's stillness. He honed a blade against a whetstone, the rasping sound the only note in the air for a long moment before a low wave of voices swept through the gathered ranch hands. From her perch on an overturned pail, Lily felt a shiver of apprehension crawl up her spine. A cattle drive? In 7 days? She still struggled to mount a horse without grimacing. "Cattle are ready to head to summer pasture in the high country," Hank declared, eyes fixed on his work. "It's a month-long push. Need every hand we got." Finally, he lifted his gaze, denim-colored eyes settling on her. Lily felt the weight of his attention. Every hand. That meant her. A queasy feeling churned within her. She wasn't one of them. She was Lily, transplanted from Philadelphia, whose experience with livestock peaked at selecting the Sunday roast. She swallowed hard, fighting the knot in her throat. "Hank," she began, her voice thin and reedy, I don't know if I'm able. I've never." He stilled the blade against the stone. The silence thickened, heavy with unspoken expectations. Lily felt the collective gaze of the others, a mixture of curiosity and, perhaps, pity. She wanted to vanish, to seep into the dusty cracks of the floor. Hank eventually sighed, a sound like escaping steam. He laid the knife down with careful precision. "Never been on a drive, huh?" She shook her head, mortified. "Barely been within spitting distance of a cow." The confession sounded weak, childlike. He scrutinized her, his expression an enigma. Lily steeled herself for the disappointment she knew was coming. She was already failing. Failing as the partner he needed. Failing at proving her worth. Failing at this whole Montana gamble. But instead of the expected frustration, a spark of something like amusement danced in his eyes. "Well, ain't that a thing?" A low chuckle vibrated in his chest. "Don't you worry none, Lily. You'll pick it up. But a month? On horseback? With all those beasts?" The image that flashed in her mind was a maelstrom of dust, sharp horns, and Lily hopelessly out of her depth and probably trampled underfoot. "I'm not throwing you to the wolves," Hank reassured, his tone softening though still retaining its rough edges. "I'll put you with Rooster. He's got a good eye for greenhorns and beeves alike. And I'll find you a gentle mare, one that won't pitch you headfirst into Wyoming." Rooster, a lean man with a squint honed by years in the sun and a reputation for patience that bordered on saintly, offered a curt nod. "A small solace, but welcome nonetheless." "We pull out at sunup," Hank announced, his voice regaining its commanding tone. "Be ready." He returned to his knife, the rasping sound resuming its rhythmic cadence. The other hands began to drift away, their voices fading as they prepared for the journey ahead. Lily remained glued to the bucket, the rough wood biting into her skin. His words were intended to soothe, she knew, but they only fanned the flames of her anxiety. Gentle horse or not, patient rooster or not, she was hopelessly unprepared for what awaited her. The prospect of spending a solid month in the saddle, surrounded by hundreds of cattle and seasoned cowboys, filled her with dread. She pictured herself as the albatross, the one holding everyone back, the recipient of their silent resentment. As she watched Hank meticulously sharpen his knife, the steel glinting in the dying light, a different, sharper edge of fear sliced through her initial apprehension, the fear of letting him down, of validating his unspoken reservations. She'd come here to build a life, to prove her mettle, and yet, faced with this cattle drive, she felt more inadequate than ever. The boundless Montana sky suddenly felt constricting, the barn's silence a stifling blanket. Sleepless night. The mattress, a battlefield of lumps and dips, offered no respite. Lily tossed, seeking a position that wouldn't amplify the day's anxieties now throbbing in her muscles. The faint aroma of dried lavender, a hopeful gesture beneath the pillow, couldn't penetrate the whirlwind in her head. The Montana night pulsed with life, yet offered a symphony alien to her ears. Gone were the urban clamor, the blare of horns, the mournful cry of emergency sirens, the iron grind of the elevated train. Instead, crickets formed a relentless chorus punctuated by the lonely call of an owl. Peace should have settled, instead unease coiled within her. She yearned for the familiar racket of the city, a peculiar form of longing twisting in her stomach. Closing her eyes brought no relief, only a relentless slideshow of memory. Mrs. Rosenblatt, swathed in a faded floral house dress redolent of mothballs, the overflowing dumpsters behind the bakery, a magnet for buzzing flies. The claustrophobic apartment she'd called home, each room dwarfed by the single cabin. These were the very things she'd fled, the scenes she'd yearned to erase. So why did they now haunt her, sharp and insistent as thorns? A gentle thump resonated at the bed's edge. Lily squinted to see Blue, his intelligent eyes gleaming in the sliver of moonlight slicing through the window. He'd been her silent guardian on the floor, and now nudged her hand with his cool, damp nose, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. "Hey!" she whispered, her voice raspy with exhaustion and a prickle of rising panic. "You awake too?" Blue pressed closer, resting his head on the mattress, his gaze unwavering. She stroked his velvety fur, drawing a small measure of solace from his steady presence. He seemed to perceive her disquiet, radiating a silent pledge of protection. The cattle drive loomed, a dark premonition shadowing her thoughts. Hank hadn't explicitly demanded her participation, but the unspoken expectation hung heavy as lead. She knew absolutely nothing about cattle, horses, or vast expanses. A city transplant, a bread maker, not a ranch hand. Just imagining herself responsible for a single cow, never mind an entire herd, sent icy tendrils crawling down her spine. What if she failed spectacularly? What if she proved to be nothing more than a hindrance? The doubt spiraled, each one a sharper barb. She pictured herself lost and isolated on the immense prairie, the cattle thundering away, Hank's disappointment a visible brand. An absurd fantasy born of her own insecurities, yet she couldn't dispel it. Blue shifted, nudging her hand again, a silent plea for reassurance. She sighed, threading her fingers through his fur. "It'll be okay, boy," she murmured, as much for herself as for him. "We'll manage. We always do." But even as the words left her lips, she doubted their truth. The city was behind her, yes, but the anxiety had stowed away, a constant companion in this new, bewildering landscape. She closed her eyes again, concentrating on the measured rhythm of Blue's breathing, seeking a sliver of calm in his companionship. The night stretched on, long and unforgiving. Sleep remained a distant, unattainable haven. Dawn's first mishaps. Montana dawned ablaze, a canvas of violent purples and fiery oranges that offered Lily's gut no peace. The chilled air, heavy with the reek of turned earth and the nervous hum of cattle, pressed down on her. Blue, blessedly oblivious, sat sentinel at her feet, his tail a comforting metronome against the hard-packed dirt. Hank, a looming, silent figure etched against the faint light, radiated a disapproval more potent than any reprimand. Lily's throat constricted. Sleep, a fitful visitor to the spare room's unforgiving mattress, had offered no respite from her anxiety. This was it, the start of everything. And she was already floundering. The sturdy mare Hank had saddled, a picture of equine patience, seemed a colossus. Mounting blocks were for the weak, Hank had declared, leaving Lily to grapple with her inadequacy. She seized the reins, inhaled deeply, and attempted to mount. Her initial effort resembled a frantic mime, limbs flailing, curses muttered under her breath. The mare merely shifted, unimpressed. A soft whine escaped Blue. Hank remained an unyielding monolith. On her second attempt, she secured a foothold in the stirrup. But as her other leg arced over the saddle, her skirt snagged, throwing her off balance. She landed hard, a small cloud of dust erupting around her. Blue, his concern evident, nudged her cheek. "I'm all right, boy," she mumbled, mortified. Finally, stubbornness and the weight of Hank's gaze propelling her, she managed to heave herself into the saddle. The mare, thankfully, held steady. Lily gripped the reins until her knuckles shone white. "All right?" Hank's voice, rough as shale, offered no encouragement. "Yes," Lily replied, striving for conviction. "Ready." A snort, hardly a vote of confidence, was Hank's response. He urged his own mount forward, and the cattle, sensing the shift, began to stir. Their collective bellowing filled the air, a deep, resonating rumble that vibrated through Lily's very core. A tawny river, they flowed from the corral onto the vast expanse of the range. Concentrating on Hank's instructions from the previous day, Lily guided her horse along the herd's perimeter, nudging stray animals back toward the center. Then chaos. A jackrabbit exploded from beneath her mare's hooves. The horse, startled, sidestepped violently, nearly ejecting Lily. Panicked, she yanked at the reins, emitting a sharp, involuntary cry. The sound, amplified by the pre-dawn stillness, sliced through the bovine chorus like a shard of glass. A wave of alarm coursed through the herd. Several cows bolted, eyes wide with terror. Damn it! Hank's roar carried across the melee. He spurred his horse into action, deftly intercepting the escapees and guiding them back into the mass. Lily, consumed by humiliation, watched his display, her stomach a leaden weight. She'd botched it. Proven her worst fears true, she was a useless city girl, utterly out of place. Hank reined in before her, his face a rigid mask of fury. What in the hell was that? He barked, eyes blazing. I didn't mean to, Lily stammered, her voice a mere breath. A rabbit, it spooked her. A rabbit. Hank spat the word. This ain't a picnic, Lily. It's a drive. You gotta be alert, prepared for anything. He swept his hand towards the agitated herd. Now look at the mess you've made. We're already running behind. He wheeled away, muttering under his breath. A tear escaped, tracing a path down Lily's cheek. She scrubbed it away, fighting the urge to crumble. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. But fear coiled tighter in her stomach. Maybe this life wasn't for her. Maybe she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Blue, sensing her distress, nudged her hand with his cool, wet nose. She stroked his fur, finding fleeting solace in his unwavering affection. She had to persevere. She had to prove him wrong and, more importantly, prove herself wrong. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the plains. The day was barely underway, and one stumble was already in the rear view. But a long, arduous journey stretched ahead. Blue's guidance. The sun was barely a sliver above the jagged peaks when Hank pointed Lily towards the herd. A sea of brown and black, chewing and shifting, blocked her view of the distant valley. Fear pricked at her. She'd never been this close to so many animals, let alone been tasked with moving them. Just keep 'em pointed towards the creek, Hank grumbled, already urging his own horse forward, leaving Lily feeling adrift in a dead emotion. Her horse, a gentle mare named Penny, shifted nervously beneath her. Lily tightened her grip on the reins, her knuckles white. The air vibrated with the lowing of the cattle, a sound that echoed in her chest like a trapped bird. She nudged Penny forward, hoping to blend in, to become just another part of this bovine wave. That's when Blue appeared, a furry shadow weaving between the legs of the cattle. He nudged Lily's boot with his wet nose, then trotted a few paces ahead, barking softly, insistently, at a small group veering off towards a stand of scrub oak. He glanced back at her, his intelligent eyes conveying a clear message. This way. Help me. Hesitantly, Lily followed Blue's lead. She kicked Penny gently, guiding her towards the strays. Blue darted back and forth, nipping at their heels, turning them back towards the main herd. Slowly, awkwardly, Lily mirrored his movements, using her reins and her voice to reinforce Blue's directions. It was clumsy, imperfect, but it was working. A thrill, faint but undeniable, coursed through her. She was doing it. The sun climbed higher, painting the sky in hues of orange and rose. The air grew warmer, but the humidity was rising too, thick and heavy. Lily could smell the coming rain, a sharp, metallic scent that tickled her nose. Hank rode up beside her, his face unreadable. You're a natural, he said, the words sounding almost grudging. But keep an eye on the sky. He didn't need to tell her twice. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, boiling and swirling like a cauldron. The wind picked up, whipping Lily's hair across her face. The cattle, sensing the change, grew restless, their lowing turning into anxious bellows. A jagged bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The herd panicked. The cattle surged forward, a chaotic stampede of hooves and horns. Lily lost her grip on the reins. Penny reared up, her eyes wide with terror. Lily clung on for dear life, the world tilting crazily around her. Another flash of lightning, closer this time. Penny screamed and stumbled, throwing Lily forward. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. But it never came. Instead, she felt a solid presence against Penny's flank, a low growl rumbling in her ears. It was Blue. He was using his weight to steady the mare, his body a furry anchor in the storm. He barked sharply, a command that seemed to cut through Penny's fear. Slowly, the mare calmed, her trembling subsiding. Lily, still shaken, regained her seat. She leaned down and wrapped her arms around Blue's neck, burying her face in his thick fur. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you." The storm raged on, but Penny was no longer panicked. Blue remained at her side, a steadfast protector in the midst of the chaos. Lily looked out at the scattered herd, the driving rain blurring her vision. It felt like everything was lost, that the cattle would be scattered across the valley, impossible to gather. But as she looked, she saw Blue, already moving, already working, herding small groups back together, his small body a beacon of hope in the storm. He was telling her, without words, that it wasn't over. Not yet. Finding her place. The storm had exploded the herd across the plains, scattering them like a fistful of feathers thrown to the wind. A prickle of despair traced Lily's spine as she clung to her saddle. Distant, mournful cries of separated calves, lost amid the bluster, tugged at her heart. Hank, a dark and silent figure against the stormy horizon, gestured towards a stand of cottonwoods. "Try over there. Some might have bunched up." Swallowing her apprehension, Lily kneed her mare forward. Blue, attuned to her unease, bounded ahead, nose questing, ears pricked against the wind's lament. They discovered 3 calves huddled miserably beneath the trees, shivering like aspen leaves. Reintegrating them with the herd proved a delicate dance. Terrified and confused, they darted erratically. "Steady," Lily murmured, a mantra as much for herself as for the skittish youngsters. Dismounting, her boots sinking into the sucking mire, she shifted tactics. Softening her voice, she crooned a gentle imitation of a mother's call. To her astonishment, a small, white-faced calf responded, venturing a hesitant step. Blue, comprehending her aim, subtly herded the calf, preventing its escape. Slowly, laboriously, they shepherded the trio back towards the main body of cattle. It was a grueling task, the mire a relentless leech on her boots, the wind a stinging whip across her face. Yet, with each gained yard, a spark of hope flickered within her. Perhaps she wasn't entirely inept. She could manage this. The river crossing presented the gravest challenge. Roused to a furious froth by the recent deluge, it roared, a muddy, surging beast. Hank assessed the scene, his jaw tight. This won't be pretty. His terse instructions barely pierced the river's clamor. Lily's duty was to guard the rear, preventing any calves from being swept away. The lead steers, urged forward by Hank, balked at the water's edge, their hooves skidding nervously on the bank. Then Blue took the initiative. Unbidden, he plunged into the frigid torrent, swimming with powerful strokes towards the far side. Inspired, the lead steers followed his example. The rest of the herd, placing their trust in their leaders, plunged into the swirling chaos. The crossing became a maelstrom of churning bodies and panicked bellows. The relentless current threatened to drag them under. Lily's pulse hammered in her ears as she spurred her mare into the river. The icy water seized her legs in a paralyzing grip. She frantically scanned the turbulent surface, searching for signs of distress. A lone calf, separated and floundering, was being dragged downstream. Reacting instinctively, Lily drove her mare towards the imperiled animal. Reaching out, she grasped the calf's ear, clinging desperately as her mare fought against the relentless pull. Slowly, painstakingly, she wrestled the calf back towards the relative safety of the herd. Shivering and spent, she finally stumbled onto the far bank, the calf trembling beside her. The remainder of the herd had successfully navigated the crossing. They stood on the far bank, bedraggled and weary but safe. Hank approached, his expression enigmatic. Dismounting, he stood before Lily, his presence imposing, his gaze unwavering. "You did good, Lily," he conceded, his voice rough, yet laced with a hint of something akin to respect. He nodded towards Blue, who was shaking himself like a furry metronome. "That dog's got more sense than half the people I know. But you've got backbone. Didn't figure you for it." A surge of warmth flooded Lily, banishing the lingering chill. It wasn't merely the relief of a successful crossing, but something far more profound. Hank's words were a validation and acceptance she hadn't dared to hope for. "Thank you," she whispered, her throat tight. Hank clapped her on the shoulder, a surprisingly gentle gesture. "Let's get these beeves to pasture. You earned your keep today." As they rode towards the setting sun, the herd trailing behind them, Lily felt a deep sense of belonging settle within her. The Montana sky, ablaze with vibrant hues, seemed to envelop her in its warmth. The sprawling landscape no longer felt menacing, but rather a realm of possibilities. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could forge her own place here, in this harsh yet captivating land. Perhaps she could build a life, not merely endure it.